So this is the latest book biography by Bologan, Victor Bologan. It's really a great book compared to the one he made many years ago, which is this one. This was a little booklet compared to it. There are, however, in this biography many of the pictures and some of the games used for that book. However, this book has like more than 80 games, some fragments of games. It's really a huge story with more than 408 pages, and there are in general a lot of tables of the results that now I cannot find, like always, you know, when you look something you can never find it. But each game ends up with lessons that you can read here, lesson. So it teaches you about what you learn from that game, and this is very, very useful because this is what we should do, right? We should gain some information from watching that game. Some of the lines to me seems a little too long for following them, but again, it's a good analysis which teaches you what a grandmaster generally does with his games, okay? Maybe in the end there is some political story about FIDE and the country of Grandmaster Bologan, which is a little too fast and superficial for people that maybe don't have a real knowledge of FIDE and Moldova and what is going on in that country. So maybe it should be a little expanded because obviously the new generations, for sure, they don't know much about it. However, it's honestly a great book. With one could just buy it to see Bologan's game and learn from them. And now I will show you one of the games, okay? The game we are going to see is game 72. You will see it from Bologan's side because he's white against Sergei Tivyakov, that is black, in Croatia in 2010. Here Bologan begins saying there are chess players who, on principle, defend their favorite variations, usually of a dubious nature. But at the same time, they are very difficult to refute. Seryoza Tivyakov, I think it's Sergei, but obviously they have all these nicknames, has always been one of his principal rivals. In particular, he was very fond of playing the Scandinavia. He rarely lost there and confidently said that white had nothing in this opening. And if you don't believe me, then prove the opposite. Before the game, I sat down to get ready. My computer was not so strong and I was more guided by my own thoughts and feelings. I asked myself, what will happen if I sacrifice the d4 pawn? And so let's begin. e4, d5. So Team Scandi should pay attention to this game. E takes d5, queen takes d5, knight c3, queen d6. Tivyakov made a chess-based DVD on this line, and Bologan says Tivyakov's favorite move, the queen can also retreat to a5 or d8. d4, knight f6, knight f3, c6, it's kind of important move, knight e5. This is a very, very good move which is very difficult to refute for black. Knight bd7, and here there is a move that is very interesting. Knight c4, queen c7, knight f3, knight b6, sorry, queen f3, and bishop f4 and queen d7. And here there is a lot of analysis because it shows Bologan's preparation. It seems that black played also queen d8, and so that's kind of interesting. There are up to 3 different lines that he analyzed after that. So clearly he was prepared to refute Tiviakov's opening theory. Okay. Now there is a diagram here at the end of this analysis, which means you should think and find what you would play as white. He played this move h3 and gave double exclam. It seems that before they played castle on the long side, on the queen side, and then there was queen g4 and so on, okay? But h3 clearly blocks this queen g4. And also here there is a long analysis which shows that also Tiviakov played it before, okay? So that's kind of interesting. Knight takes c4, bishop takes c4, queen takes c4. That's the sacrifice that Bologan was talking about. Bishop b3. White's idea is to aim for development and simply play chess. In my preparation, I look at many variations and decided that I would always have some sort of compensation for the pawn. e6. Or he can play also e5, okay? And here there is another big line. Well, it seems that Bologan really did a lot of study on this variation. So, kind of interesting. So, e6, rook d1, queen b6, castle, bishop e7, knight e4, and knight takes e4. Queen takes e4 and castle. And now there is another diagram, which means you should stop here and try to think for white what would be your move, okay? Bishop e5. In order to provoke the move on f7, f6, weakening the e6 pawn. And in general the move is multifunctional. White wants to transfer one or even both rooks to the king side and launch an attack there. Of course, white could go for bishop d6, but exchanges make black's task easier, so not good. Yeah, and also this thing is nice because practically white has the bishop pair pointing at the enemy castle, and look how kind of limited are these two bishops. This is definitely bad. Now look how great is the position for white. It's dynamic. This doesn't seem very dynamic for black. It seems kind of crap, cramped, yeah. Okay, so what did black play? c5, rook f e1, a5, and notice that here there are a lot of analysis about this. Bologan says it's winning for white, so he shows really a lot of work in these games as analysis, okay? Rook e3, rook d8, rook takes d8. It was practically impossible to avoid the exchange of one pair of rooks, but I had envisaged this during my preparations. So we are at move 20, so he was already prepared to up to this move. Queen take d8, and also he analyzed bishop takes d8, rook d3, and queen f8. And now there is another good move, which is bishop a4. And he says, I managed to find a weakness, and now bishop d7 is threatened. Sorry, bishop d7 is threatened. If my rook gets to the 7th rank, it will be hard for black to defend. So that's the idea. You want to play the bishop here and exchange and control the 7th rank, which would be good because obviously he also has the queen. f6, bishop c7. As we can see, the two bishops are really controlling a lot of enemy squares. f5, black partly solved these problems on the king side, but in return abandons his queen side to its fate. Queen c4, queen f6, and queen b5. Probably. It's important to keep the opponent under the cosh and gradually infiltrate his position with my pieces. So rook a6, a bishop takes a5. No hesitation. Probably bishop d8 was also strong, and it gives a line to justify this, okay? He says, this is always a very serious question. When does it make sense to exchange your initiative for some pawn? Yeah, well, it's a good question, in fact. Black continue with e5, which seems the decisive mistake. Can you imagine? A pawn push is the decisive mistake. It seems that it was possible to defend after bishop d6, and it gives a line, also if white still has a kind of advantage. But e5 is the decisive mistake. Can you see what black will play here? Because obviously there is a diagram, and so it means that you... sorry, it's white. What white will play here? Because he put a diagram, which means you need to think and find the continuation. He played rook d8. In my blue notebook there is also a section on difficult moves. One of this type is taboo moves. For example, putting pieces on square where they are attacked. Very often the opponent overlooks such moves, and you yourself do not always find them. Evidently, Sergei overlooked this one. Bishop takes d8, queen e8, queen f8, bishop b3, bishop e6, bishop takes e6, rook take e6, queen take e6, king h8, and now there is another good move by white, which blocks everything, otherwise you don't win the game, okay? The move is queen c8, because you see, if he takes, it's checkmate, so this is gone practically. White not only wins a pawn, but much more importantly, his pass a pawn becomes practically unstoppable. So let's see what happens. Bishop e7, queen takes b7, e4, a4, bishop f6, bishop c7, c4, and a5. And here black resign. So here there are lessons. He always put at the end of the game the lessons. He says, lesson 1, Sticking to one's principle in the opening is a double-edged sword. On one hand, you delve deeply into a position, perfectly feeling all its nuances and typical techniques. On the other hand, you become quite predictable, and it's easy to prepare for you, especially nowadays with the help of modern computers. 2. No matter how strong, effortless look, there will still be invasion squares. You just need to show ingenuity and perseverance when he played bishop a4, okay? 3 difficult moves, the rook d8, are called so because some of them fall out of sight of the opponents. That is, they are not even considered among the candidate moves. Work needs to be done to fill this gap. I, for example, had a special notebook where I wrote out suitable examples, which, by the way, later came in very handy with coaching. Okay. Again, it's a great book with the story of this grandmaster, and I believe it's worth reading just for the games, because it puts so many games and so many ideas in it, so good analysis, so the games are very interesting. And then of course there is the life, if one is able to follow what happens in the chess world. This is a good example of his life and career in chess. Hope you will enjoy the book.